You gotta have, you gotta have, you gotta have.
En el nombre de Allah, el benéfico y misericordioso. In the name of Allah, the beneficent, the merciful.
And then one of the things also that we recognize down in Central America are the pyramids that also link. Getting into a little bit of politics, NAFTA and GATT. You know, the news media here, the mainstream media, likes to portray the Mexicans coming across the border to get jobs. It doesn't take us across the border to give us an understanding of why they're coming across the border. And many were brought across the border because you have, they say, 11 million that were, I guess unaccounted for that somehow got across here. Can you talk a little bit about how NAFTA and GATT and how this whole thing undercut the Mexican farmer and all of that?
Well, and it's not by accident. It was planned. The scientists and some of the researchers told them that if they enacted NAFTA, it would increase the flow of migration, the so-called illegal migration from the south to the north, because it would undercut the economies of these countries. And it's exactly what it has done. And what has happened is that was always the objective because they wanted cheap labor. Slavery was never replaced. And the only way that they've been able to profit in this system is that they have to have a cheap labor class to make it survive. So what they had to do was then create an environment to create a cheap labor class. Because black people were now beginning to get into unions, and Italians and other immigrants had already done this. They weren't allowing themselves to be used that way. And the migration from the U.S., from Mexico to the U.S. had sort of stagnated. After Reagan actually gave emancipation to many of those who had come and allowed them to gain citizenship and get their documentation in order, it sort of leveled off the flow of people coming in and out of the country until NAFTA, which was under Clinton. What that did is it created an economy in Mexico and Central America where for generations families had been able to provide for themselves from their own land and sell off the excess to make profit and live and buy the other things and do these kind of things. Through NAFTA, corporate farming took over all of those lands and then forced these families now, where for years we've been nothing but farmers, now my son or nephew or granddaughter or somebody has to go to America to work at a factory for pennies because they're not citizens, they don't have paperwork, except less. Now you got your cheap labor class. It's a criminalized class, so you don't have to give them lunch and the benefits because who are they going to complain to? It was a criminal class of people created. Criminal not in the sense that they endeavored in criminal behavior. They were illegal.
Right.
They literally made them into a people that couldn't have a voice without exposing themselves. So they were treated as criminals, even though their only crime was leaving their home to go make a living for their family.
So can we say, and this would be hard to believe, but can we say that NAFTA, that they knew, because we know that the enemy, he doesn't just put something on paper
not by
and just
accident,
move on it.
right.
He, like you said, he does his research and all his reports. So can we say that he knew that this would create?
Absolutely, and we know that they knew because all the avenues for people to come and find jobs in the middle of the nowhere in Kansas and Nebraska at these factories. Who built those factories knowing that they would be people to employ at less than minimum wage? That's all planned and schemed, and the routes to bring people to those locations. Somebody developed that. People didn't just wander across the border and head into Kansas and magically find a job.
Right.
That was all planned out ahead of time. People didn't go into Iowa and find a meatpacking factory. Why would a Mexican mother know to go into an all-white town in Kansas or in Iowa or in Indiana and find a job?
Right.
So that's all been schemed and planned for, knowing that these people would never have a place to go and voice any concerns.
Now we have this huge backlash. And once again, it's something I think that has been stirred up by the media, because here you have them being, as you're saying, in a very strategic way, being brought into America either through semis or back of trucks are crossing the border. They're coming into America. But now you have such a large, I guess, population or influx. Now there is this huge deportation. And one of the things that you talked about is how under the Obama administration, I think you have over 2 million deportations, and we're talking once again, as we were in slavery, the total disruption and destruction of family. We have the DREAM Act and all these. Can you talk about the deportations? And then we want to talk about the immigration reform.
Right. Well, the deportations, I mean, it is that, exactly that. It's a destabilization of the family. And anything that destabilizes a family destabilizes the nation. So when you're looking at citizen children at 5 and 6 years old, and their parents get arrested and deported, well, what happens to those children? They go into foster care. We already know the history, and research tells us that many of those people that go down into that system, they end up in criminal behavior because there's not any other avenues for them. Worse than that is through these deportations, it not only emotionally stunts in these individuals, the children and the parents, but it physically, literally breaks them up. And you are in many cases sending people back home to Mexico where there is no, that's why they left there and risked everything to come here, or Central America, depending on where they're from. And then you also have now young people who are terrified and traumatized. And it's very similar to the experiences of slavery, because you basically you're trying to keep dominance and dominion over the minds of the family and young people so that they don't aspire to be free. You want them to aspire to fit into your system and be serviceable so that they don't risk the same behavior and treatment. And it's very dangerous for the government because Mexican people are connected to one another.
Right.
And even though they will still work out of necessity, within the people is fostering a hatred for the mistreatment.
Right.
You can't be a Mexican family and you see another Mexican family separated and you don't feel the pain and hurt of it. And that's what is, I believe, the hand of God in the whole thing, is that we've become disconnected from one another, but through this open hatred of our enemy towards us and their mistreatment of us, it's bonding us again, realizing that we have a common enemy.
Right.
And we have to unite to face him, because that's the only way we can face him and deal with him in an effective manner, is in unity.
Because we had seen after the Million Man March, which was called, of course, by the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, and over 2 million came out, even though the mainstream media and all the forces of this society tried to make it a failure. It was an overwhelming success.
That's right.
And then you had the Hispanic community, which there was no call.
Right.
It was just, as you were saying, to protest. And it was a huge turnout.
That's right. That was the year right after it started. It's always been a pattern. In '95 was the Million Man March, and in '96 massive protests started. In '05, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan called for a Millions More movement. And in '06, it was massive. Unheard of numbers. 1 million people in Los Angeles, almost 1 million people in Chicago, all over the country.
Right.
And there was no leader that called for these marches. There's no national figure that could spur this. It was just the collective anger and frustration of the people and our sense of unity that just bonded us together.
Right.
And I think the enemy is very aware that if you have a man who's capable of galvanizing 1 million or 2 people, and then you have a community that can galvanize itself, and you introduce those two to one another, that's a very troubling thing for those who wish to keep their positions. And they've worked and are attempting to work to try to disunite, keep the communities disunited, but it's ineffective because our necessities and the things we're experiencing are so intense now that we don't need a lot of coaxing in the right direction. And if we do, it seems that the God of the time is really working with nature to make sure we move quickly into the direction that he intends for us, because you can tell by the circumstances of our communities and the conditions. If you look at the weather and things that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has warned us about, it's definitely showing us that God is not happy or satisfied, and you can feel it in our community. Our people aren't satisfied with where we are, but we may need something to help us get closer to where God wants us to be.
With your interaction with the minister, being in Chicago, what are some of the things that the minister has shared with you or said to you about the Hispanic people?
You know, he loves the work, in particular, of the Mexican people. He loves the work ethic. He has many brothers and sisters who work on his farm, and he says he loves how they work, and they work for their families. He said they're natural builders, and many helped to do the refurbishing of the mosque in 2008 and different properties, and the work on the farms that we have from the Mexican community in particular. And he just has a love he loves work. So when he says he sees people working and working for their families and having a good motive for it, he's inspired by it. He's always wants, his words to me where he wants the Mexican people to know in Chicago that they are God's people, that they're part of that community that God came for. And so that's been my striving to do that since he shared that with me, you know, in terms of his desire to see our people united and to see the Mexican and Puerto Rican and Spanish-speaking community united with the black community, but united within themselves first, so that they can get the respect that they're due, and then together we can get what we're supposed to have. And his drive to see that happen, not now, but since he started, you know, in New York, is inspiring to know how much he's already given to that, and that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad have given to that mission of both communities coming up out of the condition. But just to know that it's that close to his heart, that every time I see him, he mentions something about it, that he thinks about it, that he's working on it, that Black Family Day in New York City was built around him seeing a Hispanic and a black brother fighting. And then he went to work to create a Black Family Day. I mean, this is his history and legacy for us. And we in his community of believers have to be more informed about it so that we can better inform the broader community.
Now, just a few more questions.
Yes, sir.
You said, which I didn't know, that the only home that has been outside of the United States of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is in Mexico.
That's right.
And as we know, with Mother Taineta and her family, they were placed down in Mexico. Can you give us a little bit about that history?
You know, from what I know of it, you know, student ministers Rasul Muhammad and Ishmael Muhammad and our Minister of Information, Brother Ahmed Muhammad, and their sister, they were all raised there. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad loved it there. I've heard on some of the table talks and from Mother Taineta Muhammad that he referenced it, that when he said it, and Brother Rasul Muhammad, I believe, was the exact quote that I heard, was that he said when he got there to Mexico that finally he had found a place that had the kind of environment and air that he was looking for, where he could work. And, you know, it's interesting because Mexico is a key state in terms of it geographically where it's placed. It is the connection of the north to the south. It's got the pyramids historically, and when I say an important place, I don't mean just in current politics, though it is, and obviously in ancient world too, because you don't really find those pyramids here in North America outside of Mexico, and then you find them Central America going down in. So there's definitely something about the energy there, the terrain there, the people there in particular. But the Honorable Elijah Muhammad wanted to build a new world. And it's interesting that he received his last communication that I'm aware of was a note or a card written from Master Farad Muhammad from Mexico. It was postmarked. So you have Master Farad Muhammad going into Mexico. When the Honorable Minister Louis Fargas shared with us that when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was fleeing from on the run, if you will, from the hypocrites, he had gotten on a train and decided to go down to Mexico. So there is something very special about Mexico, and as I said, even to the Mexican people, there's something very mystical about the place, where people don't even know the name, what it means, and people don't understand who they are themselves, but we feel that there's a sense of importance. There's evidence that this is a place where magic, if you will, happens, where there's definitely some other aura there, yet we're not fully conscious or aware of it because we don't have the knowledge that corresponds with that feeling.
And that runs right into my last two questions about the vision-like experience. And what you had talked about was the Christ figure of Quetzalcoatl. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, sir.
And that was powerful what you were talking about. I think I took some notes in that the feathered spirit, and that he had two natures.
Right.
So if you could talk about that vision-like experience, and then just go into this Christ figure, and
yes, sir. The minister had his experience where he was taken to the wheel in Mexico, in Tepoztlan is the name of this area, where there is a mountain, and on the mountain there is a pyramid that is dedicated to Quetzalcoatl, which is the feathered serpent. Quetzal, it means, it's a bird called the Quetzal bird, which is a green, beautiful bird, and in Coatl, or Catl, would be serpent in the native language. They also call him, the Mayas have the name Kukulkan for him, but it's the same significance, which is the Christ figure. He represents this, and that's who the indigenous say that the age of Quetzalcoatl, the time, his return is what everyone's awaiting, because he was said to have gone away. It's just so similar to the Jesus story. And what he was born of a virgin, very similar characteristics. He was said to have walked on water, much of what mirrors the Gospels.
I think that's in Graves. I think it's Graves. It might not be the exact author, but the 16 crucified.
Exactly. He does mention that as well. So you have these histories, and you have the nature of him. There's actually, when he's presented, because everything to the indigenous people is double, duality. So there's a black Quetzalcoatl and there's a white Quetzalcoatl. And this confuses the scientists and researchers even more, because some think Quetzalcoatl was an actual person of history. Some think Quetzalcoatl is a mythical, like, legend. Others think Quetzalcoatl was an actual ruler that happened, and others think he's just a man that never existed but is prophesied to come. Now, all of those are true. It's the interesting part about this, because he was a man. He was a king of the past, but he's also was a sign or type of the one to come at the end. It's interesting that in the glyphs, he has a black Quetzalcoatl and a white Quetzalcoatl, because the man that we know is the fulfillment of that, Master Farad Muhammad, came from both people and both natures.
Right.
He had a duality to him, because how could he overcome and conquer that nature except that he possessed both of them?
Right.
And in showing us how to do it, we could overcome it. And that's what Quetzalcoatl represents. He represents civilization. He comes to teach civilization to the people. He comes to teach them ritual and or religion, if you will. He comes to show them a new way of life, and through him, a new time era begins. Well, that's Christ. That's Mahdi.
Right.
He comes and does away with the old. The minister receiving his vision there, I think, absolutely seals for everyone. Not only is this the man that the monotheistic world has been looking for, of Jews, Christians, and Muslims, this is the man that everybody has been looking for.
Because that vision-like experience came around that temple.
Exactly. And that he had the experience in Mexico. And it's an earthquake in Mexico that restirs his mind to go back and recollect the vision that he'd forgotten he had in his sleep. So it's interesting that it happens there. Again, a sort of magical experience, as there are so many of them that seem to happen there in Mexico for people, that is just embedded and makes the rich history and mythology of Mexico even more intriguing. Because why was it Mexico? Why didn't he have it in Detroit? Why didn't he have it in America someplace, or Mecca? Why Mexico? Well, Mexico is another sacred valley. Mexico is a valley. Mexico City in particular is a valley. Mecca is situated in a valley. We're here in Phoenix, a valley. So there's something about valleys, there's something about these areas that are unique apparently, because they tend to allow these experiences to happen. When you look at the minister having an experience like he did, which has guided him, That's what proves the authenticity of it. From Mexico, he's not saying that he had a dream. He's saying that he believes in a vision-like experience. He was taken to that place. Well, why is it from Mexico? Again, in an area where they experience so much of these wheels phenomena. It appears from what I believe that it's God just through these not examples, through these experiences, he's allowing for all of these other things about UFOs or ovnis or wheels, as we call them.
Right.
This out-of-body type of experience, this argument on whether the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is alive or not, he's resolving all of it in one experience.
Yeah.
Was the temple built for the man Quetzalcoatl? Why did it happen right by that mountain? Why would it happen? All of it there. It's a synergy of every single thing that there's doubt and question about, and he seals it up in one experience. And then the proof of it is not the experience, but what he does after the experience, which verifies then that this is authentic. And being in Mexico, where our people are fascinated with that kind of activity, phenomenon, draws the attention of the minister. He's gotten worldwide acclaim, and in particular in Latin America, from his willingness to speak about his experience on the wheel. That has fascinated many people from Latin America, because so many have had experiences with wheels.
Right.
And it's not seen as something as taboo. Many people believe that because they've seen them and witnessed them. But nobody of the level of a Minister Farrakhan with the worldwide appeal and recognition was willing to really go on record and put themselves out there. And not just say, yeah, I believe in these things, but I know who's on them. Matter of fact, I was on one. And it has made him a sort of folk hero to the UFOologists, and as well as to the people in Latin America who get ridiculed so much for saying, I saw this.
Right.
And, and on top of that, then you layer that with his work. He's doing the work of reconciling the black and the white, the upright and the bestial nature of man. He's fulfilling all of that based on that experience. So I think it's not by accident that it's where the Honorable Elijah Muhammad went. It's not by accident where the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan happened to be there and had his experience there. It's not by accident where for years now these UFO phenomena have been happening there. It's not by accident that it's where a black man from America would go into Mexico and there have an experience that helps him in uniting the two people together by what seems very peculiar circumstances, but seems that God tends to work that way most often if we read the scripture. So I'm not sure if I fully answered that question, but to the best that I understood it, I think that's the value in that experience, in the figure, in the man that is, we believe, Quetzalcoatl, making himself known to his servant to make it known to the rest of us.
That was powerful. I guess, to end it all, because you've just spoken about 2 hours, and as you know, we had a very full day yesterday, which was beautiful because of the spirit of the believers here in Arizona. Can you say something as we close out to our Latino brothers and sisters, Mexico, Puerto Rican brothers, just the whole about the Nation of Islam, and I'll just let you go ahead.
Yes, sir. I would say that, that to our brothers and sisters that are from Latin America, or what's referred to as Latin American in the Caribbean, all of the issues that we face in our community, God has already raised up an answer for that if we would accept it. It's not by accident that we've been conditioned to reject everything coming from what we call black, especially in Latin America. Anything dark, we've rejected it. It's not by accident that God, as he always has, would work from amongst the despised and rejected. And the enemy has worked to condition us to reject everything coming from the despised and rejected. So I would challenge us to understand that how precious we are to God, but that our acceptance by him is based on our doing of good and righteousness. And we can't do good and righteousness unless we know better. And we can't know better unless we know the truth. Because it's that truth that we need that's coming from wherever it may come, that will help us to be what God intends for us to be. It just so happens that that truth is coming from the despised and rejected black people of America. That doesn't make them better or worse than us. It makes them the instrument that God is using to save us and the rest of humanity that would obey him. We never had a problem when we thought Jesus was a Jew. We never had a problem when thinking about Muhammad being an Arab. We never saw them as not worthy to be listened to because they weren't us. There's a man from here who has in his bloodline the indigenous people, the black people of America, which we have in our bloodline. It's to our benefit if it's good for black people in America who are in the worst of conditions and they benefit from the truth that he's speaking. We should listen and take what is good for us and use it for the benefit of our people. What would be more logical? What would be better for us? If it works on the worst in our community, wouldn't it work on us too? If you have a brother or a sister or aunt or uncle on drugs and you see that the Nation of Islam has a way to get people off of drugs, why not bring them? If you're having problems and you spiritually feel empty and you need to understand God better and you see a community that is working to understand God and do the work of God, wouldn't it benefit to you and I to come and listen? And I'm telling you that you'll be surprised that the black Muslims is not what the media has told you to be. Just like our communities aren't what the media portrays us to be, why would we take our enemy media's perspective on somebody when we know they lie about us? So I would encourage us to hear for ourselves the message of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, which is designed not only for black people in America, but the black communities, which are the darker people of Mexico, Puerto Rico. And when I say the darker people, it doesn't mean that we're going to all be dark-skinned. It means that we originate from the darker people and the aboriginal of the people of the planet. We all have that in our bloodline. We're disconnected from that, and that's why we're suffering. And what I would invite us to do is go hear Minister Farrakhan for yourself. You may not be able to go in the building where he's at, but go to YouTube and type in Farrakhan and whatever subject you want to know about, and something will come up. And you listen to it, and you tell me if he doesn't make sense. And if he does make sense, listen. And then change your life based on that. And test it for yourself. And if you can come back and say, well, that didn't work, okay, then maybe you're onto something. But I know you won't say that because it's absolutely 100% foolproof. The only thing we could do is not do it properly or do it wrong. But the truth as given to us by God through the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is a healing for every issue we have. And we've tried everything else. We've tried buying things. We've tried making up things. We've tried applying the wrong things. But we've never tried the one man that the enemy keeps telling us isn't our friend. That he's an enemy to us and hates white people and hates everyone who's not black. All of it is lies. You and I have been kept from him because they fear what he will cause in us, which is a change for the better, and us removing the shackles mentally and then physically from us and being what God intended for us to be, which no longer allows us to be subservient to them. Puerto Rico can't be a slave. Mexico can't be a slave. Central America can't be a slave if we know the truth and hold on to the truth. If we unite based on that truth and work together based on that unity. They keep themselves in power by keeping us divided, ignorant, and away from the speaker of truth and the champion of truth, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So it doesn't hurt you anything, it doesn't cost you anything. Go look him up for yourself and listen for yourself, and you'll be surprised that it's exactly what you've been looking for all the days that you've been on the planet.
If you all will be just patient just for a few more seconds, can you say something to our brothers and sisters in their language?
Oh, sure.
Yes, sir, and that'll be all that I ask.
Okay. O más quiero invitarle a la comunidad alohispana que sean de raíces indígenas de Centro y Sudamérica, que escuchen a las palabras y la guía del honorable ministro Louis Farrakhan, que la media nos dice muchas cosas sobre este hombre, pero es un hombre digno, es un hombre que habla la verdad y nos da la verdad para mejorar a nuestras vidas. So pido que no escuchen a la media, pero ustedes mismos encuéntrenlo en YouTube lean sus palabras en el internet o por periódico y vean si lo que anda diciendo el honorable ministro Louis Farrakhan no es la verdad. Claro que sí que es la verdad, porque es exactamente lo que necesitamos para mejorar a nuestra condición y a nuestra comunidad. Y el enemigo nos está tratando de poner en una posición en contra del ministro Farrakhan, porque ellos teman a la verdad que viene de sus labios para liberarnos en México, en Puerto Rico, en Centroamérica, en Sudamérica. Esta comunidad de nosotras, esta comunidad latinoamericana que dicen que son de raíces indígenas y africanas y raíces de pueblos con no solo historia grande, pero con un futuro grande. Si solamente aceptamos la palabra de la verdad, aprendemos quién somos nosotros y luego actuamos y hacemos el deber de Dios. No solo decir sus palabras o estudiar sus palabras en las Escrituras, pero vivir por los principios de esas palabras y de los profetas de Dios. Escuchen al ministro Louis Farrakhan, lean sus palabras, estudien sus palabras y cambiaré su vida. Gracias.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to thank Minister Charles for his hospitality and allowing us to conduct these interviews here at the mosque in Phoenix, Arizona, mosque number 32. Once again, for those who are listening who are in the area, this is a beautiful establishment here, and I would like to invite you personally, even though I don't live here, I would like for you to come out and, don't listen to the mainstream media and these propagandists, because you have to understand that their world is falling and they want you to fall with it. That's the simple truth. So I invite you to come and hear the truth for yourself. And as student minister Abel says, that, if there's some way that it doesn't work for you, which could only be that we are using it or applying it improperly, that you try it out for yourself at least, and then you can say that it doesn't work for you. With that, I would like to greet you as I came before you in the greeting words of peace and prosperity of Assalamu Alaikum. May God continue to bless you and your family with the light of truth and understanding.
You gotta have knowledge for life. You gotta have knowledge